day, student. Welcome to Module 2 for Biology, DES 22. This is a presentation aiming to help you prepare for the upcoming examination 2019. Let's start. Oh, welcome to Biology. I really would like to wish you to be hardworking, dedicated, self-driven student in this course. It's the only way you can pass. Once you are a hard worker, once you really try to spend more time on this subject, you will definitely be pleased at the end of the term. This presentation covers the subject content in brief and some general guidelines that I want everyone to keep in mind when you are preparing for this examination in 2019. I will discuss some of the content of your study guide in order to help you prepare for the coming exam. By now, you should be having a good idea on what this subject is all about. And it's self-explanatory because biology, and it's something that you are aware of, you know it, you are exposed to it in your secondary schools, and I'm sure that's why you chose this. Good. Now, please pay attention to the exit learning outcome. At the beginning of each chapter, there are learning objectives. Those learning objectives are very important because they guide you on what you should know in that specific topic. So you should really read them and then you study the chapter. After studying the chapter, you come back to those learning objectives so that you can answer them. Excuse me. Let's say, for example, the exit learning objective state, you should be able to define a certain term. Let's say, for example, that term is homeostasis. Then you come back and you should be able, when you finish reading that chapter, you must then come back to the learning objective. Then you should try now to define that term without looking in the books. That can really help you that you have learned something or not. Now, also very, very important, pay attention to the verbs. Whenever we ask question, we ask you to discuss, list, define, explain, describe. Photosynthesis, describe the concept of homeostasis, describe negative feedback, describe aerobic respiration. So you need to know what is to describe. Now, we start with excretion system. The excretion system is a system in our body that is responsible to remove metabolic waste as well as substances that are in excess than what our body requires. Remember, our body need to have a constant supply of certain substances. Could be the nutrients, it could be the gases like oxygen, or it could be the waste products such as the carbon dioxide as well as urea. These substances need to be at a certain level if they are in excess, or they need to be removed out of our body. So the kidney, now the excretory system is made up of the kidney. Those are the two main organs. We have two kidneys, the one located on the left side and the right side. We have the left kidney and the right kidney. Now, you also need to know the tube that are associated with the kidney as well as the blood vessels. Now, when you look at the kidney, there are two tubes running from the kidney to the bladder. The ureters, you need to know them. The urethra as well as the bladder. You need to know need to be able to label this. Now, going inside the kidney. Now, the kidney is made up of many tubes called the nephron. Now, that each nephron, you need now to know the structure of the nephron. It's clearly indicated in your syllabus there, in your textbook. I would just like to highlight few terms there. You need to know the Malpighian body, which is made up of the glomerulus and the Boltzmann capsule. You need to know their structure, the function, what happened there, ultrafiltration, and also you need to know the adaptation of the glomerular and the Boltzmann capsule to ultrafiltration. You also need to know the proximal convoluted tube, the distal convoluted tube, the loop of Henle, both the descending and ascending. So these part are part of the nephron. I'm just trying to highlight to you, and they are clearly indicated in your modules there. And the associated blood vessels, we have the afferent and the efferent. The afferent, it differs from the efferent in a sense that of their diameter. The afferent has a wider diameter and the efferent have a narrower diameter. Please pay attention to those terms in biology, narrower and dilate. Now, the narrower we are referring to when the blood vessels, the lumen is smaller. We don't say smaller, but we use the word narrower. Neither dilate, when the blood vessels lumen is wider. And also look at why the importance of that afferent to have a wider lumen and also the efferent to have a narrower lumen. The transportation of urea to the kidney. You should be able to know that the urea is produced in the liver. And when you look at the location of the liver and the kidney in a human body, they are far apart. So now you need to know how its urea is transported from the liver to the kidney. So clearly indicated there. The kidney failure. There are conditions that causes our kidney to stop functioning. And that condition we call it kidney failure. Now, if our kidney stop functioning, and you need now to know what causes. It could be an infection, a bacterial infection. It could be that a person was involved in an accident, a car accident, or a person was stabbed, all that, and the kidney is damaged. In that situation, then a person needs a new kidney because kidney filter some of the urea out of our body, some of the toxic substances in our body. Now, a person needs another kidney. There are two options now. A person will go on the dialysis or a person will receive a new kidney, which we call kidney transplant. Now, that brings us to the kidney treatment. We have a dialyzer, which is a machine, and a kidney transplant. Let's move on. So therefore, just going back there, you need now to know what is a dialyzer, how does it work, the kidney transplant, how does it work, what is the advantage of the dialyzer, what is the disadvantage of a dialyzer. The disadvantage, for example, of the dialyzer, I'm just highlighting, which is there clearly in your book, is that a person it's time consuming. A person needs to spend has to go to the hospital 3 times a week for the dialyzer. And also, the kidney transplant, the advantage of it is that once a person receives a kidney, the person continues to live a normal life. That person does not need to go to the hospital often. And the disadvantage is that for the kidney transplant is that sometimes a person might not receive a matching kidney. There is just not a match. And sometimes also a person needs to suffer from tissue rejection. Even though this person receives a kidney from another matching blood type, a body will still reject the tissue, the kidney. So we need to pay attention to that. Let's look at the homeostasis. We need to know the definition of homeostasis, changes that occur in the body that bring about thermoregulation. Thermoregulation comes to how our body regulates our body temperature. We are endothermic organisms. Yes, we are influenced by external temperature. But when our body temperature rises or drops, we do have mechanism in our body that regulate. Regulate means monitor it, bring it back to a normal range. For example, the normal range of a human body temperature is 37. Now, changes that occur, meaning that when the body temperature drops and when the body temperature goes up, what are the changes that occur? And please focus on the blood vessels that supply blood to the surface of the skin, the sweat gland. You need to, the dilation, the constriction. When the blood vessels constrict, it's transporting less blood, which carry less heat. Very, very important association there. And opposite again, when the blood vessels is dilate during vasodilation, just look at the word vasodilation and vasoconstriction. It's clearly indicated there. Vasodilation, dilation, the blood vessels are dilate. It's transporting more blood, which carry more heat. And this occurs when our body temperature rises. Condition that makes our body temperature to rise, or situation we have when we exercise, when we are sick, that sometimes our body temperature rises and our body temperature have to regulate it. Changes that occur in our body that bring about blood glucose regulation. Glucose is a very important fuel in our body. Without glucose, we will not be able to have energy. So now we need to eat. And when you look at some of our macronutrients, it's a carbohydrate, it's a protein and fat. And carbohydrates, we need it because it provides us with energy. When we take in carbohydrates in our body, that carbohydrate is digested into smaller unit called glucose. Now when you eat, you have your favorite meal that you like. It can be pizza, it can be porridge, it can be whatever, any food that is rich in carbohydrate. And sometimes we eat more. That's not a problem when you eat more, because our body, when the blood glucose level rises, our pancreas and our liver work together to regulate the higher blood glucose level to bring it back to a normal range. For example, when you eat your meal rich in glucose, your blood glucose level goes up above 100 milligram per 100 millimeter of the volume of your blood. Now what will happen is that your pancreas will secrete a hormone called insulin, and the insulin will be transported to the liver. In the liver, the insulin will convert this excess glucose, and it converted back into glycogen, and the glycogen will be stored for future usage. And that lower the blood glucose level. And if you did not eat for, let's say, more than 4 hours, or you were exercising and your blood glucose level dropped, this stored glycogen will be converted back to glucose. But this time it's by another hormone called glucagon. Please pay attention to the 3 terms. Glucagon, it is a hormone that converts the stored glycogen into glucose. So glucose and glycogen, these are type of carbohydrates. Some of the student confuses this term. Please, glucagon, it's a hormone that converts the stored glycogen into glucose. Very good. The endothermic and ectothermic organisms. This question, it can be many questions can come from this topic. It can be any topic in this presentation, but you just need to know what are the endothermic organisms, what are the endothermic animals, and what are the ectothermic. Please, endothermic, these are animals that can regulate their body temperature irrespective of changes in their environment. So that means their body temperature does not rely on the external temperature. Where else the ectothermic organisms, their external temperature relies on the internal temperature relies on external environment. For example, the reptiles, the snakes, and the reptiles, when their external temperature, when the environment temperature rises, so does their body temperature. When the environment temperature drops. So that's the body temperature drops. That's why you find them carrying out certain mechanism of basking in the sun or hiding under the rocks when it's hot, just so that they can also lower their body temperature or increase their body temperature. So the method used by the endothermic and endothermic organisms to regulate their body temperature, I just mentioned them: the hibernation, the basking in the sun. So ways that living organisms carry out in order to ensure that their body temperature does not, the body temperature is regulated. Now, the ectothermic organisms do not produce enough heat, enough metabolic heat. That's why they rely on external environment. In comparison to endothermic organisms, they do produce enough heat. They produce enough heat from muscles contraction, as well as from the heat energy from the food they take in. Let's talk about cell division. Cell division, please, you need to know what is cell division. You also need to know the type of cell division, meiosis and mitosis. You also need to know what is meiosis. Meiosis is, for example, is a type of cell division that results in a formation of gametes. The gametes where they have a half number of chromosomes compared to the somatic cells. So remember, we have somatic cells. These are body cells. And we also have the gametes. Please, these are sex cells. You notice that the sex cell and the somatic cells, they do have different number of chromosomes because of how they divide. Somatic cells divide by mitosis, and gametes or sex cells, they divide by meiosis. Now, the type of reproduction, living organisms, they have different ways on how they reproduce. Now, let's talk about, for example, the animal kingdom bacteria. Kingdom bacteria, all bacteria reproduce asexually through binary fusion. This is a very simple type of reproduction, whereby a bacteria grow to a certain size that splits into two, and these two can grow successfully and continue to divide, and they reproduce after 8 hours, so they reproduce faster in comparison, for example, to human beings that takes 9 months to reproduce. So that's why one of the advantages of asexual reproduction is that it's simple and it's fast. In contrast to sexual reproduction is whereby you need to have 2 parents for an offspring to be formed. Unlike in asexual reproduction, where you need only 1 parent. The advantage and the disadvantage of asexual reproduction, they are clearly stated there. As I said, asexual reproduction is simple and it's fast, and also in terms of if that environmental condition favor that species, it's good because the offspring are all the same. But if it doesn't, it disadvantages the species, because if the species cannot adapt to that environment, all species will not adapt. Please pay attention to that advantage of asexual reproduction in terms of genetic similarity. Now, sexual reproduction is that there is genetic variation. There's difference between offspring belonging to the same species, which make some of them to be more advantaged, more vigorous, more active, which make them to survive, to reproduce organisms that were able to survive, and which allow these species to continue existing on Earth. You should also be able to compare and contrast between these two types of asexual reproduction. Vegetative propagation is similar to asexual reproduction. Vegetative propagation is whereby we have man-made, where you form an organisms with an influence on human, meaning that it's me who manipulate. What do I mean? For example, I can purposefully come to the neighbor's house, cut off a certain branch, and I take that branch of a plant and I take it to my house and I plant it there. I purposefully took that branch and I plant it in my yard so that it can grow. So that means it did not grow on its own. So vegetative propagation is basically the formation of new plants with human effort or with the manipulation of human effort. So vegetative propagation is similar to asexual reproduction. The definition is clearly indicated in your modules there. Read it, understand the whole concept of vegetative propagation, and also, I mentioned this already, the difference and the similarity between mitosis and meiosis. Let's move on. The female and the male reproductive system. So you need to know the parts, the function of both systems. Please, you also need to label them. The testicles, the sperm duct, the urethra. Some people don't know the difference between urethra and sperm duct. Please make sure you know the difference. The ovary, the uterus, the oviduct, the uterus lining. Some of the students don't know the difference between the uterus lining and the uterus. The uterus is the one that comes first in the middle. And the uterus lining is the wall of the uterus. Please know that the civics know those things as well. The process that occurs in female reproductive system, the ovulation, you know what is ovulation, the menstruation cycle, and also the role. What does estrogen and progesterone do during menstruation? What does it do during pregnancies? And what does menstruation do during puberty? Please, you need to know them. For example, estrogen during puberty in female stimulates menstruation. It stimulates the development of breast. It stimulates the woman start to the hip widen, the pubic hair develop. That is the role, the effect of estrogen and progesterone during puberty. During menstruation, please, estrogen, it helps to make the uterus, it repair the uterus lining. It makes the uterus lining thicker. It also ensures that ovulation takes place. Please, progesterone, maintain the uterus lining during menstruation. And also, just in case of pregnancy, okay, please know about the role of ovary and corpus luteum. The ovary in terms of producing the estrogen, and also the corpus luteum in terms of producing the progesterone. Please, during pregnancies, estrogen and progesterone continue to play a major role. Progesterone maintain the uterus lining so that the woman does not menstruate during her pregnancy, and also just to make sure miscarriage does not occur. And just also to make sure, to ensure that estrogen the level of estrogen gradually increases toward the end of pregnancy, just to stimulate the contraction of uterus lining, to ensure that the woman it prepare the woman for labor. Very, very important. Please, during pregnancy, the glands that secrete estrogen and progesterone, it's the placenta. Please, you need to know that. Let's move on. And also, I want to focus on another, fertilization. What is fertilization? What is implantation? Very, very key, important there. Now, the genetic. Genetic is also one of the very interesting topic within our DES. So you need to know the genetic terms like chromosome, defined chromosome. For example, these are thread-like structure that contain the genetic information that we pass on from our parents to our children, or we say from the parents to offspring. The DNA, please know the DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid, and the RNA. That is a ribonucleic acid. You need to know the difference between the two of them. You need to know that the DNA is found in the nucleus. It doesn't leave the nucleus because it's too big. And you need also to know the structure of the DNA. You need to know how the RNA is formed. It's formed from the old templates of DNA, and we call that process transcription. Please, you need to know that. And also, you need to know what is a gene. It's a section of the DNA. You need to know the mutation, the sudden changes in the genetic information variation, differences that occur between organisms belonging to of the same species, the dominant, the allele that are expressed even in a heterozygote, homologous zygote chromosome. These are allele that are located at the same position and on a DNA. The allele, please, we say alternative form of genes. We use letter to represent genes. For example, 2 capital B. One of each, we call it an allele. That's why we say allele is an alternative form of genes. Please, the genetic diagram, very simple one, is the one where you have the sex chromosome, XX for girls and XY for a woman. You do a crossing or you do a Punnett square to show what is the offspring, what are these couple likely to give, what is the gender of their children. Is it 2 boys, 3 boys, or both boys or girls? The sickle cell anemia disease. The sickle cell anemia disease is a disease of the red blood cells, but it's a hereditary disease, meaning that it is caused by a recessive allele found in a parent. Now, if these 2 parents are both carrier, they have a greater probability of giving birth to a child with sickle cell anemia. When you look at the red blood cell, it's round. The sickle cell anemia is a red blood cells that have a crystal shape. That's why the word sickle cell anemia came. And you notice that anemia is a disease when a person have a lack of iron. And note that iron is what is needed to form hemoglobin that form the red blood cells. That's why the disease called sickle cell anemia disease. A disease caused by a lack of red blood cells. There's red blood cells there. Now, please, a sickle cell anemia in this person, they are less likely to get infected with malaria. This is because of their shape. And remember, the Plasmodium parasite, they use our red blood cells to reproduce. But the crystal cell anemia, their shape make it unfavorable for the parasite to reproduce. That's why a person with sickle cell anemia, they have some advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that they will not get infected. They hardly get infected with malaria, but they will have anemia. They will feel tired easily because their red blood cell cannot carry enough oxygen. But it's a hereditary disease. So, and I'm sure, so you need to know what it is. Carcinogen in human beings. Please, carcinogen are substances that causes cancer. Chemicals, UV rays, all these substances. You need to know them. Now let's talk about our chapter where we have the ecosystem, where please you need to familiarize yourself with a producer. What a producer? Please, producer are plant. All plants are called producer, especially the green leaves plants. The primary consumer are animals that feed on plants. You remember way back in our lower grade where we call it herbivores. The secondary consumer are animals that eat primary consumer. The tertiary consumer are animals that eat secondary or that feed on secondary consumer. The decomposer are animals that feed on dead organic. So you need to know what is the role of producer in an ecosystem. All those type of animal that I just mentioned. Also, you need to know the terminology of population. What is population? What is a species? What is ecology? What is an ecosystem? And a species, for example, is a group of organisms that look similar, and they are capable of producing fertile offspring. Then we go to food chain. What is a food chain? You should also be able to draw a food chain. So does a food web. We also look at the nutrient cycle. We have 3 main nutrients that are recycling in our environment: we have water, we have carbon, and we have nitrogen cycle. Please, all these three cycles, especially nitrogen, students find nitrogen very, a little bit complex, but it's not. Please let's quickly just go through the nitrogen cycle. About 78% of our atmospheric gas is nitrogen. Please, this nitrogen cannot be used in their pure form. It needs to be changed into another compound for our living organisms to use it. So I urge you to now look at ways nitrogen fixation, way in which nitrogen can be changed into another form. We have lightning, we have bacteria fixation, and we also have industrial fixation. Please read it. My urge is just for you to read it. And if you don't understand when it comes to nitrogen cycle, please, you have the information there, and you can definitely contact me. So carbon cycle is very simple, and also water cycle, it is clearly stated there. Deforestation. Some students we find them that they don't like to read much information on deforestation. Although deforestation these are cross-topic curriculum, you can learn them in other subjects, but still you need to know them. What is deforestation? What are the causes of deforestation? How the human population and increasing in human population affect? How does it leads to deforestation? What is the effect of deforestation? So things like desertification, things like loss of nutrients, things like soil erosion, things like it disrupt water cycles, all those things. Because deforestation is when you cut down tree without replacing them. And now the level of water vapor in the atmosphere will be reduced. There will be less moisture, less cloud, and less rain. Then we go to conservation. Conservation is one of the most important topics as well in biology, please. Some students, you find them that they don't cover this topic because it's the last topic in the modules. Please, conservation is the word say conserve. Is a way in which we living organisms use the natural resources in a sustainable way, in such a way that these natural resources can still be available for future generation. Now, we have the project of black rhino, and you have noticed that these are the animals that are on the edge of extinction. So please find in our modules there, they have very good project, especially they use project in South Africa, Mpumalanga, where they are conserving, where they are keeping the genes, where they are putting these organisms into game protected area, so that, or where they are giving really strict penalty to the people that are hunting the black rhino horns. Please know what is conservation, what is the aim of conservation, why it is important to conserve these living organisms. Please, it's important so that we can have an intake ecosystem, so that we can ensure that our ecosystem will continue to have a diversity. This will attract the tourists, people, because we would want to travel many kilometers to come and observe and see and enjoy the black rhino, and in that way we can generate income. And also we can living organisms depend on each other. So if that species is extinct, there is a greater possibility that the other organisms that depend on the black rhino, they will also likely to extinct. I'm not only referring to black rhino, we are referring to all living organisms in an ecosystem. They are all, because of our increase in human population, we need to conserve them, because they are all at threat of extinction. Now, at our conclusion remarks, please read and understand the stated objective prescribed to you in this unit. Please read the instruction carefully. When you are given a question paper, usually you have enough time. Please to avoid panicking, just ensure that you really you make sure you cover all your topic so that you are able to be calm and to read the instruction. And please give what is asked. Provide the answer of what is asked. For example, if I ask you to describe the process of excretion and you provide to me the process of respiration, you're not going to get a mark, even though you have studied respiration. So that's why we need to make sure you read the instruction carefully. Your answer must be complete. Please define or suggest or whatever it is that the question asks. Try as much as possible to write as neatly as possible. And use your own examples. Let's say, for example, if I ask the endothermic organisms, or if I can, anything can be asked to describe the process of photosynthesis. Provide plants that you know that photosynthesis takes place. Provide example where excretion, living organisms that we know that all they excrete. Provide example to demonstrate that you understand, because you need this knowledge to teach a Namibian child in this environment. So therefore it requires you to provide relevant examples. Good luck with your examination and all the best.